I think we'll get started. There might be one or two others who are joining us late. But anyway, Jesse, do you have any words of wisdom before we get started?
Yeah, I don't have any words, Sylvia. You guys have been doing a lot of work without me, so I'm just poking my nose back in for a little bit.
All righty, sounds good. With that, we'll get started. How's that? So welcome everybody to our February 26th Community of Practice. And today we're going to talk a little bit about where we're at in terms of sharing between faculty and librarians. So we're going to start with a transition. We've been looking at the RSD framework, and that's the pentagon that we're all familiar with on the left that we've been noodling with and kind of looking at our classes through that lens. And now we're going to start making a transition to the framework for information literacy. And I have the two representations of both frameworks up here for you folks to look at. If you take a look at it, one of the things I'm going to have you do is look at those between now and the next time. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on them today, but I wanted you to take a look at where we were going to be going in terms of frameworks and kind of what they look like. When I last left, your assignment, so to speak, was to pick a librarian or faculty collaborator. And for you folks who are faculty members, which is both of you, it was to meet up with a librarian and get feedback from them. So I'm wondering if we can take a few minutes and discuss what happened, what'd you find, how'd the interaction go?
Well, I can say for myself, so I contacted Kristen, and she gave me a really good suggestion to find out if UVU has its own librarian that would be specific to physics and start a conversation with them. And so I sent them an email, and they never responded.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any other faculty members out there who in the science department that have worked with the RSD framework or framework for information literacy?
Yeah, so I know that I'm not sure about the framework for information literacy, but I've seen the RSD show up a couple other places, one in particular that I'm thinking of. So okay. I know there's a professor in biology that's used it.
Okay. We might try to connect you with some other folks out there who are using it, and I know that there's other, well, I'm pretty sure there's at least some pockets who are using the RSD.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of a good solution might just be to get in touch with Kristen again. And
sure.
I mean, I know that's at least one librarian who wants to talk to me.
Yep, there you go. That's good. That's good. Hey, hi, Sharon.
Hi. I can't see anything yet. Sorry, I'm late.
Nope, that's fine. We're just getting started. We're discussing what the outcome was of your collaboration with your librarian and faculty members. So we're taking a look at those. And Dustin just related to us that he reached out to a person on his campus, to some of the librarians, and did not get a response. So Harry, what kind of luck did you have?
I work with a librarian, Hans Kieschel here, and Hans comes to my classes quite regularly to introduce what the library, the resources, and over the past, I want to say the past 10 years, we refined our methodology where what I mean in the sense of the students, they have a topical research project that they have to do. I really don't care what the topic is as long as it's defined within the class context. And then Hans comes into my classroom and used to do a 20-minute, half-hour discussion on databases and all these kinds of things, and then gets, and then what we've done is, and then we used to go with some of my classes, actually go to the library and we do a whole workshop kinds of things. And then over the years, we've tried to reverse that, where he comes into my class now, talks for 5, maybe 10 minutes, and does an intro and says, you know, I'm the librarian for your area. And in my assignments now, they basically have to go individually or with the team, their research teams, go to the library, sit down with Hans, and he has a personal meeting with them. And they go through what is the topic, focusing in the topic, and then goes through the appropriate databases, and then does a small meeting, and he has an online meeting schedule that he meets with them. He has found that to be so much more productive. And for me, it's saying what's going to work best. They have to report back in their outlines or reports when they met with him, what time they met with him. And then we, as Hans and me, have an interaction of how this is going. I went to see him last week and said, I'm involved in this. I knew nothing about FIL, and basically said, are you familiar with this? And I think it triggered, first of all, he said no, but then I said, it's more with the librarian, with the libraries. And I said, I'm looking at this research skills development framework, gave him a copy of the one, and said, this is something we should talk about. I forwarded the earlier email, and he's really interested in following up. So he may join us later on, but he's, looking at that. I leave for a field seminar, taking students out Friday, but when we get back, we're going to meet up and talk about this more.
So how did your relationship originally start? So we've got Dustin, who reached out to a librarian with no luck, and you're saying that you've had good luck. So what strategies can you provide for us as we try to connect?
I think from my end, the library, I do a survey, a pre-assessment at the beginning of the classes, and more students, out of a class of, let's say, 60, I know at least 20% of them have never been in the library in the last semester.
Okay.
And then others are more weekly, basically monthly, if something is due that they have to do at the library. And then some are once or twice a semester. And so I was a little taken aback by that. I mean, not even, and the question also says online as well. So it's not the physical, but even online, they're not going there. And then a majority of them don't even know what's available at the library. And so for me, one of the purposes is to physically have them step in the library, just to realize there's a library on campus. And B, that there's a lot of resources available at the library besides places you can study. But then there's a lot of resources and databases and things like this. And so that personal meetings is the way we've evolved over time. And the students have been really good because it's focused in with them. It's on their topic instead of some generic database. And so this is over the last 20 years, I would say, has developed more and more focused. And we bounce off each other. I give him my assignment. He says, well, here are the new links that you got to use. And then he says, well, we can change this. And then I feed back to him and this is what I'm hearing. So it's a back and forth situation.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sharon, what kind of luck did you have?
I'm the bad student who didn't do her homework. My apologies. I actually had a hard time figuring out what an assignment would be, and then I just got caught up in everything else and didn't come back to it. So we do have an excellent librarian on campus who has been, I think, at the national level involved with some of the framework, some developing some resources, and he's been doing some great things on campus. I need to connect with him again.
So have you connected with him in the past?
Mm-hmm.
And so what's your strategy to connect with a librarian? Like if you were new faculty coming in fresh from the start, what would you tell them? What would the procedure be to connect, make that connection?
I'm pretty casual. It's usually help. I need your help with this.
Okay. All right. So good. So any insights that any of you got from the interaction or takeaways that you want to share with the rest of the group?
I mean, I think working with Hans, and our library is set up so that each librarian, research librarian, or how they define it, they've basically taken down their walls around those areas, and there's open tables around there. And each of the librarians is assigned to certain, you could say, certain departments around the university. And so when a student logs on and goes to my department, let's say geography, up pops Hans Kiesel, and Hans is your research librarian or the person you should contact. And there's email and things like that, but then there's also a calendar where you can plan meetings and things like that. And I think students, the librarian's now teaching a course in our department about research strategies, skill sets, and it's a 1 credit or a 2 credit course that our students take. And so he's teaching that now within our, it's available to our students as well as others. And he's really found that useful in the sense of what are students, where the students are today and what resources do they need? And then the other way around, how can he help students where they're at right now and getting that perspective? Because often we all get in our different camps and don't realize what the other camps are dealing with.
Sure. So Jesse, I have a question for you, and that is, and I just am not familiar at Stout. Does Stout have librarians dedicated to particular subject areas?
Yeah, so we have split up into liaisons. And that liaison program is only about 2 to 3 years old and hasn't, because the library staff has had so much turnover in the last few years, it hasn't been probably fully rolled out. So it just depends on the library, how much they invest in that relationship that's based on disciplinary area, or if it's just supposed to be a contact person who then passes things off to delineations based on task.
Uh-huh.
So like Dustin, I was just creeping on UVU's library website, and the person I probably think you should contact is Emily Bullo, because she's the head of library instruction. And so as soon as you say, I've been doing this community of practice and all we talk about is information literacy and research skills, her ears are going to perk up. And hopefully that will be a signal to her that she wants to have a conversation.
Okay, yeah, I'll try that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
because your physics liaison, it just depends
Right.
how much weight they put on that role in the organization.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Jesse, for faculty who aren't familiar with the library, how would you suggest they go in and find the right person at the library to contact? Like how do we know?
Yeah, anytime you're starting to talk about teaching strategy, information literacy, research skills, you want to head straight for the head instruction librarian.
Okay.
So just start looking in the personnel pages for that. Or simply call the director and say, I need the person who can advise me on learning strategies for research skills. And that will they'll either know who that person should be, or that will trigger them to say, there's a gap that we're not a service gap that we're not filling on campus.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. That's helpful.
Yeah, I have to jump out of this call to go to a meeting.
Okay.
I'll see you.
So thank you for your expertise before you had to leave. I know that you just were touching base. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep. See you guys in a couple weeks.
All righty. Talk to you later, Jesse.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye. To move forward with the conversation then, and as we think about it, and Jesse started to talk about this, but who are you? Let's take a look at our allies within the library. So Jesse just gave us a little bit of insight on how to find those allies. So if we don't happen on the right person, is there somebody else there? So Dustin, I would be interested to see if her suggestion works for you, or if there really is is a gap in services at libraries. Harry and Sharon, do you know who your information allies are? I think you know at least one. Each of you mentioned a person.
Well, it's my understanding that our library does not have a large number of staff. And that may be a misperception. I should take a look at it. But I believe that Jeff is the guy. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I know at our place there are several librarians that, and I wouldn't know the terminology, but are dedicated to a variety of different departments on top of other jobs that they have. So, but their offices are essentially, when you walk into the library, there's about 3 or 4 offices with librarians who are always accessible. If their door's open, they have a little stand out front that they can sit at, but there's always someone there available for a student to ask questions about. They're doing all kinds of other things as well, but they've tried to make themselves front and center. There used to be a wall that you had to go through a door to get there. They've taken out that wall and tried to really open up that area and have tables down so you could sit down and lay out materials. There's a photocopier right there, things like that, so that it becomes an area that once you get there, you can get the interaction going.
Okay, good. How about in the larger campus community? Do you folks have any allies, any supports within the larger campus community?
The one that comes to mind for us is our writing center director, and also just our writing faculty. But the problem is that we don't have a good system in place to facilitate those conversations or reaching out. I mean, it definitely is a one-on-one kind of a thing. And even when we can make those connections, sometimes just time, the amount of time that you have to do that in addition to everything else feels a little overwhelming.
Sure.
I think that's my word for the day. I was overwhelmed. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
No, I'd agree that, a lot of these are one-on-one connections you've developed. I mean, you mentioned the writing center, that person left and now I have to redevelop that connection. And now it's some form I have to fill in. And if I don't get a response in a day or two, I've already moved on to the next lectures and I have to say, okay, do I just cut that out? Do I just say, okay, here's the website link, I expect you to go, or this is a resource for you? But no, as you say, you've got to move on. And if there's not a response, this connection you've developed, say, for multiple years, that individual's moved on to a new position, moved to a new university, and now you got to redevelop a new connection, and they may be doing things differently. So
sure, yep. Dustin, anything on your end?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't go to the library very often myself. And I think students can be pretty successful doing background research or any of the research they can without actually getting into the library. Where my struggle has been is getting them to even open up Google Scholar and try to look at the scientific literature. I mean, UVU is not a place where we're going to have stacks and stacks of scientific journals, and but the internet does, and that's really the literature that I want the students getting into. Like, instead of pulling things off of Wikipedia, pulling things from scientific journals and getting legitimate citations in there. And it seems like that's very much an afterthought. So I'm trying to find ways to change that perception of what the purpose of the literature is, what the purpose of citations in whatever they're writing that is, and that sort of thing. And so and so there isn't really a central location like a library where that kind of thing happens.
How about just in terms of connecting research, information literacy, others across campus? Is there support that exists on your campuses that will encourage this cross-pollination, the other faculty, librarians, administrators to work with one another or to engage with these frameworks?
Can I ask a
Pardon?
I can ask a stupid question? Just
Sure.
what would that look like? We may have it, and I might just not recognize it because I don't know what it looks like.
I can take you to what's happening here at Stout, for example. Yeah, that's a good question. So what happens for us here, and the way I got connected with Jessie, is we have something called the Nakatani Teaching and Learning Center. And they basically promote good quality teaching on the campus. And that's one of their missions. And so as part of that, there's been a number of initiatives that have gone on throughout the years, but I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, might be longer than that, we got a new director of the Nakatani Teaching and Learning Center, and she really started to figure out ways to engage people to talk across campus. So for example, one of the things she's got going now is who's interested in reading a particular book, and can we get together and have a book talk. And she buys the book, gives folks the book, and you only have to commit to like an hour. And that's just on your own time, but it gets folks to like see people from other departments who just share your interest. Then there's a number of events that go on during Professional Development Week, either at the beginning or at the middle of the year. And then just lately well, I shouldn't say just lately, but for a while, she's made it available to faculty members to do a community of practice. And that's actually how Jessie and I met. We were working with Renee to bring John Willison to campus. And when John Willison came, his suggestion as we began our community of practice was to involve a librarian. So that's how Jessie got involved with our group. And she proved to be an invaluable asset. So through John Willison saying you're going to really have a much better time with this if you engage the librarians, and then having Renee say, okay, we're going to support a community of practice, she got people from across the campus to buy into this idea of a community of practice. So there was 2 of us that were really interested in co-facilitating a community of practice, and we invited others, and we ended up with about 7 people, and all from different areas: political science, I think biology, we had some folks from business, so and then English. So we right away were thrown in a group that worked across campus and across departments. Then what she does is she provided a small stipend for participating as well as for leading. And it wasn't much, it was a couple $100. And you don't get paid directly, but you can do things that support your teaching or research. So you can buy equipment, you can buy books, pay for travel to conferences. And it's not much, but what happened, at least in my case, was that I used that money to actually go do more research that involved the topic of the community of practice. So I've done 2. So in one case, I was focusing on the RSD. In another one, I was focusing on some simulation things. But just having the ability to go get a hotel room for a night let me go out and do some research. That in turn then motivated me to stay engaged in the professional development community. I was able to do research, find out more information. Then she asks us to present on campus as well as at some statewide conferences. So then we're disseminating under the auspices of the NTLC. So that supports the NTLC. She's asked us to do presentations at new faculty workshops, etc. And so that then informs more people to become involved and to connect with the community of practice, and the cycle starts again. So that's an example that I can give you from Stout. And it's basically connected me with people I feel comfortable going to. So if I want outside eyes on some research or some ideas or help, or just, hey, I have another brainstormed idea. Do you want to do this? And in turn, they're doing things. For example, one of the people that is the political scientist, she had her students do posters on political events, and she called upon the community of practice members to come give an outside viewpoint on students' posters to them before they went and presented them in a more public arena. So to ask them questions, to pick at their research and challenge them a bit. It becomes kind of a support that has tentacles working in multiple ways to support people in their initiatives. So I can give you that from Stout. So with that, you asked a good question, Sharon, so I can give you that example. How about on your campuses? Is there anything like that?
I mean, I can, talk from University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire from multiple years. We have a strong Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. And then we've also developed a Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, of which has done, the community practices and all these kinds of things. So those are two avenues where there's areas. Karen Havholm, who's presently the director of Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, multiple years ago, among multiple other things, we got involved in intentionally mentoring of undergraduate student researchers. And we used a variety of different models. And then through Sylvia bringing John in, Karen went to that workshop, and I couldn't go, or I didn't know about it, or something like that. And then she brought that model back here, and we tied it into this intentional mentoring community of practice that we had that went through the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, but was advertised through the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And out of that, developed a research project, which I did with my undergraduate students, of introducing the RSD. And there were small stipends associated with this, nothing big, a couple $100 here or there. But through these communities of practice, you can raise enough funds and add them up over time periods that I was able to go to Adelaide and present at the RSD conference. Some of my own as well as collaborating. And so is there, big time support? It's not the, $5,000, $6,000, but, putting together $100 here, $200 here, $500 there over time allows you to do some of these bigger things, to go to conferences, do these research projects. So I found, those centers very helpful, people you can talk to and go, yeah, and move ahead with that. So there is support, but it's a matter of you going out and getting involved in these.
Thanks, Harry. Dustin, is there anything out your way?
Very possibly, but I haven't been here long enough to really find it. What I have seen so far is, so the Office of Teaching and Learning here sponsors a number of learning circles, which essentially function like book clubs, where they take a book about pedagogy or just some teaching or research aspect. I'm involved in one right now on mentoring, and so yeah, they meet kind of like this. So read a couple chapters and meet every other week. And a lot of times things like the research development framework, RSD, get mentioned and brought up, not directly. It's usually not directly mentioned by whatever book we're reading, but yeah, it's relevant enough that we end up discussing these types of things as well.
Anything else from the group? All right.
I think we have to be very, as we reduce budgets at, I know this university, these are the kind of areas that the university likes to cut or reduce. There's no more stipends in the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. They're not $100 or $200. They got a budget and they'll buy these books for the book clubs that, Dustin, you mentioned. But in the sense of these stipends, those have disappeared over the last year as these things get cut. And I'm saying, from new faculty, even, faculty have been around. I think these are centers which, we have to support and keep going. And it's to reminding the administrators that these are areas that we need to reach out to, and two-way street, they need to reach out to us and saying these services are available.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. It's they made a difference for me, and they're important, but I see them perhaps being reorganized or budget cuts or understaffed or whatever. So I agree with you. That's what I've seen. Anything else? All right. So our current module is up and running as of last Friday, and our next module is going to start on the 8th, and we'll reconnect on the 12th. On the 12th, we're going to start in earnest digging into the framework for information literacy. So I want to give you a couple of assignments that prepare for that. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to go to the framework for information literacy for higher education. It's linked in the module. And just take a look at it. It will guide you through the basics of the different frames that they're looking at. Then for reference sake, something that's helped Jesse and I as we've looked at assignments and collaborated and such is to take a look at two graphics. So one of them on the right is the RSD pentagons. It took that RSD framework that we introduced, and it just looks at the 5 facets of research, or the 6 facets of research. And this is basically the left vertical column of the RSD framework redrawn. This is what I give to students. I don't give students the whole framework, and this is what I use to reference my lessons off of when I do talk to them about research and such. And what I want you to do then is also download, I call it the framework flower. What it is a graphic that Jesse found, and it talks about the different frames for the information literacy. And you can see that they come up with the themes that you'll also look at when you look at the framework for information literacy, the full page. But there are these ideas, overarching themes and overarching frames that go with it. So information has value, research as inquiry, scholarship as a conversation, different searching strategies, authority is constructed and contextual, and then information creation is a process. And as I've worked with Jesse, I've come to use the framework, the RSD framework, for explaining to students what it is they're doing. Dustin, this maybe speaks to where you want to go. I've just started playing with it and experimenting with it. This is my 2nd semester with it. But I've really found that the flower diagram, the framework for information literacy, helps me explain to students why it's important or what they're doing as part of it. So here's how you do research. Step 1, step 2, do this, do that. But now there's a reason that you do it, and it's not just because I'm asking you to. So here's the rationale behind it. And I found this to actually be a powerful tool for me, at least so far. And I've been tweaking my approaches with it, so we can have a discussion about that moving forward as well. So if you take a look at those 3 things, it'll be helpful as you move forward, giving you just a basis for our discussions. And then I have a discussion post up there for you. So as you think about it, what insights did you gain from reaching out to library faculty members? We've discussed that. You can add to the conversation if you think of other ideas, or if you go back and try again to engage with some other folks. Did you find ways to collaborate using the RSD or FIL frameworks? Any suggestions you have from anybody else? And then some responses. How might you work with one another? Do you have any ideas? So it's just a way to share beyond our conversation for today. It marks a transition where we're going to then start focusing on the framework for information literacy moving forward. Do any of you have questions or comments? Anything else you want to share or talk about, or concerns that we haven't shared today?
Thank you for putting this together. It looks like a useful thing to do.
Well, hopefully it is. So I'm actually really excited about moving to the framework for information literacy and seeing how you interact with it and what you think of it. So it'll be fun. I'm hoping too that we can. We were sitting here talking today, I think I might, since Jesse's left, I think I need to go down and re-engage with some librarians and figure out who my next contact here is going to be. That's going to be my afternoon, I think. Harry, Dustin, do you have any final thoughts?
I've never heard of the FIL until 2 weeks ago, and some of your earlier emails, so it's totally new to me. But just some of those words, when I looked at the diagram, it's why this is important. And Dustin's earlier comment of how do we get them into the literature, not necessarily the library per se as a physical structure, but the library as a virtual structure. And I give that task to Hans. It's his job to. I've got an exercise to say what's peer reviewed, what's not peer reviewed, what's primary, what's secondary, and these kinds of questions as a citation exercise. But they go to Hans to try to sort that out. And Hans works with them as they gain those references and saying, you know what, we're not going to use National Geographic, even though it gives you good background, it gives those areas. We're going to move into the Journal X. It's a peer-reviewed journal, and we're finding these through the Web of Science or through, in our area, GeoRef or one of these databases. And I'm finding, I think the FIL, what I'm seeing is this is the reasons why we do that. So I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. Good.
I think Harry really nailed it right there. For me especially, the big thing is, I think the students deep down know that peer-reviewed literature should be cited, but it's something that they add on at the end. It's not driving their writing at this point. So we're right now, well, actually both in a class that I'm teaching and in my own research group, I'm working with students to write a lot of different proposals. And yeah, it's very difficult to get them to dive into the literature on their own when, if you don't, how do you know that what you're proposing is even possible, or if it hasn't been done before? And yeah, it's been tough to motivate students. So it'll be good to have a tool to draw on.
Yeah. No, that whole idea of literature search is something, I hate to say it, but they've had no experience in.
Yeah.
And Hans at the library sees that. And I think some of that may be this distraction of saying we don't need to go to the library. It's all virtual. We can just go to Wikipedia or do something like this. And Wikipedia may be a place to start. Google may be a place to start. But then you need to focus in. And Hans is now my guy that says, you go see Hans. You tell me when you saw him. And Hans knows that I'm sending them to him for that job of focusing in and doing that literature search. And, they easily come out with 5, 10, 15 papers that are more focused, but then it's their job now to take these and then be able to try to summarize them for a proposal or their, introduction or background to the project and things like that. And that's taken years and years to try to fine tune that. The students are resistant, I'll tell you that right now, to that, because it's work. So hopefully we can work through that. And, I've 3 different classes that are doing this, and Hans is coming to my research group this afternoon to do the exact same thing and saying, I'm here as a resource, and I'm going to, after he leaves, I'm saying the expectation is by our next class meeting, you will have met with Hans to focus your research in so you can write that research proposal and things like that. So maybe I'm being more prescriptive, but they need to get out there.
Sounds good. So I'm excited to see where this discussion ends up leading us over the next few months. So this is going to be awesome. All right, if there's nothing, I have nothing else for any of you, unless you folks have items you want to discuss further, then that's it for the day.
All right, have a good day.
Yes, enjoy the snow shoveling.
Exactly. All right.
All righty, take care, everybody.